So this film left me with more questions than answered and genuinely had me scratching my head all the way home from the cinema last night. And to be honest, even now. Let's get into this one. Today I'm going to be talking about the star-studded Eddington that's definitely dividing opinions.
I am recording this. Fair warning. Is that really necessary? Look, Joe, 6 feet.
Where the buffalo roam.
Is that praying?
Where the deer and the antelope play.
How did we get here? And even worse, is it worth it?
Where seldom
At the cost of being at war with your neighbors?
a discouraging word.
That's why I'm running for mayor.
And the skies are not
Mayor of Eddington.
all day.
Thank you super duper very much.
Okay, so Eddington. Where do we begin? So this film has a huge cast that includes one of the best working actors today, Joaquin Phoenix as the County Sheriff Joe Cross, the man of the minute, Pedro Pascal as Mayor Ted Garcia, Emma Stone as Joe's wife Louise, and Austin Butler as some weird, preachy, self-righteous cult leader called Vernon Jefferson. So the main story is about a small town in New Mexico set around May 2020, and this film tackles a lot of the subjects that happened in 2020, where COVID has now come knocking and we see how the town has to deal with it and everything else that happened in 2020. Much like all over the world at the time, you had your believers, you had your non-believers, and you had your conspiracy theorists, which Joe and his family are definitely the latter portion of that, especially his mother-in-law. Joe sees himself as this kind of town saviour, protector kind of role, which you'd expect from a sheriff, but also as a family man who lives with his wife and mother-in-law who both have mental health issues, and he feels like that the town's going to pieces under the leadership of Ted Garcia, who's up for re-election, and that COVID isn't really a thing. I mean, you know the types of people that I'm talking about. Joe's had enough and decides that it's a good idea for him to run against Ted as mayor. And without informing his wife and posting it on social media, you can see throughout the film how modern politics falls into this film and how social media is kind of included in it. Now, Joe also has beef with Ted, as it was alleged that Ted assaulted Joe's wife years ago when she was just 16 that led to a pregnancy. A lot of this film depicts the use of social media and things being caught on camera to expose people. For example, early in the film, we see Ted in the bar with other council members doing essential business because you couldn't meet up in groups and social distancing was imperative. And they were being harassed by this drunken rambler that we saw in the opening scene in the film, who's trying to get in and get a drink. So Ted called the police, Joe turned up and argued that it's not harassment because he's not in the building, but suddenly the homeless man breaks in and Joe has to intervene, and the two have a bit of a scuffle, which the homeless man essentially wins and then runs off. But what Joe didn't know is that Ted's son, who he actually let off smoking drugs, caught this all on camera, then later edited it to make it look like Joe assaulted the homeless man and plastered it all over social media that put a dent in Joe's mayor campaign. This also impacted his relationship with his wife, as some of the campaign stuff he was posting is really detrimental to her mental health and also their marriage. So Joe tries to make amends and offers to cook dinner just for him and his wife without the mother-in-law, which he does, but he's left on the porch for hours as his mother-in-law thought it was best to take Louise to see this speaker or cult leader that she found online, and then they all come back to the house, cult leader and disciples all. Joe then publicly used the earlier accusation against Ted in a forum, and that was also being recorded for social media, which then backfired on him because Joe's wife Louise had to come out and say that it was completely untrue and it was a complete conspiracy theory dreamt up by Joe and her mother, and she left him and went off with Vernon Jefferson on his bus. Still can't get over that name. This then sent Joe into a villainous spiral, and he ended up killing not only the drunk homeless guy who broke into the bar again, but Ted and his son with a sniper rifle in their own home, and then made it look like a crime scene that local rioters did. So far, this film's a simmering drama that hits a lot of points about the climate of 2020 spot on. And it was so weird to think that firstly, we went through that, but secondly, that this is such modern history being put on film. Like seeing the mask again, social distancing, it just felt really odd. But this is where it gets weird and quite honestly, laughable. Because the film then turns into a one-man army against a radical ideology hit squad that's flown in by private jet because they saw the unrest of this small little town rather than the big cities, with Joe running around the town, taking on a few of them, breaking into a gun store, pulling out a minigun, yeah, you're hearing this right, a minigun, to then ultimately almost kill the wrong person, run out of bullets, get stabbed in the head twice with a combat knife, to have the person who he almost killed come out from behind the car, shoot Joe's stabber whilst recording it for social media, by the way, and Joe ends up as mayor in a wheelchair, unable to speak or walk. What? 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 I was sat there and my wife had to tell me to stop laughing because it was honestly that bad. And I wasn't the only one either. There was a guy behind me that was also fighting back tears of laughter as well. It went from a brilliant thriller that tackled some of the really serious subjects of 2020 to a Call of Duty style shoot 'em up with no context. And it was like watching two different films, with the second half being this awful B-movie. And there were so many incredible actors that were just completely underutilized in this film. Like Emma Stone, Austin Butler, even Pedro Pascal, who I know a lot of people have got Pedro Pascal fatigue at the minute, but there was just so much wasted talent. The only saving grace of this film, right, was Joaquin Phoenix, who was incredible, as per usual, and really showed the depth of his acting abilities once again. And this film was branded as a modern day Western with iPhones, and I'll be completely honest, it was a laughable hot mess. I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5, and that's generous because the only reason I'm giving it that is because Joaquin Phoenix holds up the entire film. But what do you think of this though? I know that it was a bit of an artsy film, but what's your genuine thoughts on it? Let me know in the comments section below, and I'll see you next time.